Gosh, Lieutenant Governor, I'm so honored to have you on the podcast and have you discuss an issue that has become really central to me, especially watching the explosive growth of the real estate industry over the last 7 years, specifically, I guess. And one of the things that is at the forefront of every discussion that I have is the housing crisis. And there's all these people coming to Guam and they need housing. And not only is that a crisis for the people arriving, but it's a crisis for the locals. Can we talk about what we're doing as a government relative to the impact of the market forces on the island?
Sure. It's a very dynamic situation. And in some ways, it's positive because there's a lot of economic dynamism going on, as opposed to, where we've seen in the past where there was a downward spiral and nobody knew exactly when the ground was going to fall off. Mm-hmm. In this case, we have a couple factors. We had outward migration of several thousand people, especially during the pandemic. We saw that throughout the territories. Where people who didn't have financial resources got some financial resources at that time because of pandemic aid, and went out to try and find a better living in the continental U.S. Mm-hmm. At the same time, because we have a very rapid expansion of military activities on Guam, which continues. The military activities going on right now in 2025. Is even more than we thought it was going to be in 2020 or even 2016, right? Yes. I mean, it's a function of the geopolitics, but also recognition of the very important role that Guam is playing in defense of the entire world, notwithstanding just this region. Yes. So we have a lot of people with high-paying jobs, a lot of contractors that have subsidized housing by their companies coming in, driving the market up on top of the foundation, which had already been a rental market that was very divergent based on GURA rates for subsidized housing and the military rates for off-base housing for service members, right? Mm-hmm. So this pressure, meanwhile, we have a bunch of the population whose wages started getting the division between the upper middle class and those that are barely at poverty level is widening rapidly. So it does compel us it is a crisis because it requires both the government intervention and action and also a very strong focus by the private sector to help us understand what the opportunities are. Mm-hmm. One of the things I feel that government has to do, and started doing it, and you've seen some of this, a lot of resistance in the legislature, is we have to just recognize we have to change things. So, zoning is an issue. I think, zoning, it could be a little controversial because people in certain parts of the island want to maintain the types of things they see. But the reality is that we have to recognize that we have to address population density. And recently, the legislature, Senator Chris Duenas, I'll give him some recognition, pushed through some legislation that had some concerns and resistance from some members of the legislature that were opposed to his ADU legislation. And for those who do not know what that is, these additional dwelling units, it's basically allowing separate or connected structures on residential lots with separate entrances that could be for family members or it could be rental opportunities, right? And some concerns were, that maybe the island infrastructure, especially wastewater, is going to be undermined by that. But I think that, the reality is that we're living an island that there's multi-generational families living, and having separate entrances and having privacy helps mitigate problems. You've seen the police blotter. There's, yes, family violence issues. Some of that has to do with the confines of housing. That one is an issue that I feel we have to take a look at that can address things. And then on the other side is providing incentives to private sector and direction for government to develop housing for areas or sectors of the economy that are just kind of like that are being displaced. And one opportunity I feel that we're kind of going through this rough spot, but when we think about the construction of temporary housing for guest workers, we have to think that after this construction period is over with, there can be additional housing units that are going to be for the future, especially for singles. The other thing I'd say is, people, my sense is that the different generations, the younger generations of island residents are looking at housing a little bit differently than some of the older ones.
Sure, and I think that's a function of mindset because you're in an environment where there's nothing for you. And so I was in a conversation that I had with Dean Jones from UOG. She was talking about that cycle of a young person coming up and what is there for me? Because I have to live with my parents, my income growth is this, and what are the opportunities for me other than to leave? So we have to solve this problem to retain and to grow. And our local talent is very important. So if we don't solve this problem, we just bleed out and eventually we are the aircraft carrier. We are just the place where people come in and stay for a little while and then leave and don't take any ownership of it. But one of the things that stood out to me in the GURA conference that was held recently is Fernando Estevez talked about the total cost for housing and what it should be. And his number said $2,000. That's total housing expense. That's rent. That's power. That's even internet. And so we know we're so far afield when the fair market rent is $2,100 just for housing expense.
Right.
But in that is opportunity. So like you say, the multifamily, the zoning. Yes, we want a master plan. Yes, we want things built in a certain way. So we fold amenities into the community, but we're not in that place right now.
No, we're not. And actually, I've been talking about I don't know if the term should be eliminating or unifying housing zones, but I think we should just cut the red tape and not have to go to the zoning commission for anything that for multi-residential units, even up to 4, maybe even 6, we'll have to see. There's some overlays. There's certain areas I think in the island we pay attention to because of the water lens and our mandate, and definitely for elected leaders, the responsibility we have to protect our water resource. But at the same time, we need to start providing opportunities for residents and families to maybe go in at it together.
Yes.
So if we have families, maybe mom and dad are comfortable in retirement and their kids are just coming into the job market. Why wouldn't we make it easier for them to maybe build a 4-unit apartment building on their residential lot? So everybody can have their family, but they can also get some rental income. Start giving families an opportunity to expand the wealth they have so they can kind of roll it over with the families. I think that's one area that a lot of people haven't thought about because, what normally, right, what we learned from our parents is, well, you get a job, get married, this is a little different these days, get a mortgage, go buy a piece of land or get one from grandma, and then build a house. That's it, right? But then, I think we need to help people realize that there could be more. You could still get a housing loan, but it could be multifamily. But one barrier for that is you have to go to the Land Use Commission to get an R2 zone.
Yes.
Why? Some people really push back hard on that, but I really am, if you're going to try and recover time, but also recognize we have a reality. Our culture, the Chamorro culture, the island culture, we take care of our parents or 100%. We take care of relatives that need help. Why wouldn't we be able to give them privacy while we're doing that at the same time?
No, and I think that's what we have to do. We have to stop talking to ourselves about what's been done before and start talking to ourselves about what we can do now.
Well, the other thing is we also have to recognize what can our economy and what can our taxpayers afford.
Right.
I see a lot of aspirational things, right? a lot of regulations, mimicked maybe from very wealthy communities. We're never going to be Berkeley. I don't think we want to be Berkeley. But, we kind of compound all these things we want to do and make it so unrealistic.
Yes.
And then, we end up not doing anything. It's hard because there's people that, it's true, there's ideals and aspirations, but, you have to be balanced and practical, I think.
100%.